Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into a really wild idea, something that sounds like it's straight out of science fiction. What if we could build a computer that thinks, using the same stuff that powers the stars?
So, what's the big question driving all this? Well, it's a total paradigm shift. I mean, we're talking about leaving behind the silicon chips we all know and love and diving headfirst into the dynamic world of plasma.
Okay, before you think this sounds completely nuts, let's talk about why we even need something this radical. To get why we need a new kind of computer, we've got to look at the problems with the ones we have right now.
The truth is, our current tech is hitting a wall, a hard wall. There's only so small you can make a transistor, right? And the amount of energy we're pouring into powering and just cooling our giant data centers is getting out of control. It's just not sustainable. So this silicon ceiling, as they call it, is forcing scientists to think way, way outside the box.
All right, so let's get into the solution this paper is putting on the table. And it's not just a small step beyond silicon. It's a giant leap into a whole different state of matter.
The big idea here is to use plasma, the fourth state of matter, as the actual medium for computing. But hold on, we're not talking about the super hot plasma inside a star. No, this is the complete opposite. We're talking about an ultra-cold plasma, chilled down so low that quantum effects start to take over. And that's the key. It lets you manipulate it to think in a way that's a lot like a human brain.
So, the million-dollar question, how on earth would this thing actually work? Let's break it down. We're going to look at the four key parts of this theoretical machine, exactly as the paper lays them out.
First up, you've got the medium, let's call it computational soup. This is that ultra-cold plasma we mentioned. It's chilled so close to absolute zero that it turns into something amazing called a Bose-Einstein condensate. What that means is, basically, all the individual particles stop acting like individuals and start moving together as one single giant quantum wave. And that's huge, because it lets the system act like billions of processors all working together in perfect sync.
Okay, next is the engine. And this is where things get really interesting and, a little controversial. The whole system is driven by what are called low-energy nuclear reactions, or LENRs. Now, that's a field that's had its share of skepticism over the years. But here, the idea is to use them as tiny synaptic sparks. Lasers would trigger these little events, introducing a kind of creative randomness into the system, which is exactly what you need for it to learn and adapt, just like a brain.
Now, obviously, you can't just have this exotic plasma floating around. You need to contain it. And for that, the design uses a really clever magnetic bottle. It's called a field-reversed configuration, or FRC. It's basically a self-contained magnetic field that holds the plasma really efficiently. And this is key. It doesn't need the crazy amount of energy that, say, a traditional fusion reactor would.
And finally, the readout. How do you actually get the answers out of this thing? Well, the design calls for something you can think of as a quantum microphone. It's an array of what are called Josephson junctions. These things are unbelievably sensitive quantum detectors. They can literally listen for the tiniest changes in the plasma's magnetic field and translate all that quantum weirdness into data that we can actually read and use.
So let's put that all together with those analogies, because they're actually really helpful. You've got the cold plasma, that's the brain's gray matter. You have the LNRs, those are the synaptic sparks, firing and making new connections. The FRC is the magnetic bottle that contains everything. And the Josephson junctions? That's your quantum microphone listening for the answer. See? It's a complete system, and the whole thing is modeled directly on a biological brain.
And when you look at it that way, the whole process is actually pretty straightforward, at least in concept. Step 1, laser zap a problem into the plasma. Step 2, the plasma's own crazy complex internal dance, well, it thinks about the problem. And step 3, the quantum sensors read out the result. Simple, right? Input, process, output.
Okay, so that's the theory of how it all works. But what's the point? What's the big payoff here? I mean, if we could actually build one of these, what would it be capable of?
Get this. The paper project speeds on the exaflop scale. That is a 1 followed by 18 zeros. We're talking a billion calculations every single second. That would put it right up there with the most powerful supercomputers on the planet. But it's doing it in a totally different, more brain-like way. But it's not just about raw speed. One of the most brilliant parts of this whole concept is a built-in self-cooling system. Think about that. Instead of using tons of energy to cool the machine down, this design actually harvests extra energy from the plasma to cool itself. That is a huge deal. It could solve one of the biggest headaches for modern data centers.
And the grand vision here is to scale this whole thing up. Picture it. Modular plasma chambers, all arranged in racks, pretty much like the servers we have today. And because the computation is happening in this kind of collective plasma fluid, the whole system is naturally fault-tolerant. One little hiccup doesn't bring the whole thing crashing down. This could totally redefine high-performance computing for our biggest problems. Things like climate modeling, AI, cryptography, you name it.
Okay, let's pump the brakes for a second. We have to be really clear here. This is, for now, a theoretical concept, and the paper is very upfront about the enormous challenges, both scientific and engineering, that are still in the way.
And these hurdles are, well, they're pretty major. The author tackles them head on. Things like, how do you shield the system from quantum noise? How do you prove that those controversial nuclear reactions are actually reliable and controllable? And how do you manage the insane cryogenic temperatures the whole thing needs to even work? These are not small problems.
But here's the cool part. Instead of just saying, well, these are the problems, the paper proposes a path forward. The idea is to build a small, tabletop prototype and make all the designs completely open source. Invite the entire global scientific community to jump in, collaborate, run experiments, and basically help crack these tough nuts together. So, the paper doesn't really end with a conclusion. It ends with a call to arms, a challenge. Let's ignite the plasma revolution. It's an invitation to the entire scientific community to start exploring this wild new frontier. And that leaves us with a pretty fascinating question, doesn't it? Are we looking at pure science fiction here, or could this be the very first spark of a genuine computational revolution?